İzninizle yavaştan başlamak istiyorum. Saat 2:06 geçti. Yeni gelen misafirlerimiz olursa onlar da aramıza katılırlar. Bildiğiniz gibi etkinliğimizin dili İngilizce. Onun için bu noktadan sonra izninizle İngilizce olarak devam edeceğim. Thank you very much for coming today. It's my pleasure to have Marshall Breeding with us today. He's a very well-known library technology big name, and as you may know, he's been visiting the Turkey for UNCOSLINK conference actually. So he will be given a keynote speech next week in Antalya. But he kindly offered to hold a second event in Istanbul because now he's a tourist. And this is a big, I really appreciate it because he offered this time from his personal tourist time to meet with you and to share his thoughts about the future of the libraries and technology, the future of the library automation. So I really appreciate it. And I will introduce him very briefly. I'll try to do it very briefly because he has a very strong biography. So I will be reading as much as I can. Marshall Breeding is an independent consultant, speaker, and author. He is the creator and editor of the Library Technology Guides and Libraries.org, online director of the Libraries on Web. His systems librarian appears in computers in libraries. He is the editor for the Library Technology newsletter, published through Library Technology Guides from 2002 through 2021. He was the editor and contributor for Smart Libraries newsletter, published by American Library Association, and has authored the annual Library Systems Report, published in American Library since 2014. And in Library Journal from 2002 through 2013. So he authored 14 issues of latest library technology reports, has written many other articles and book chapters, edited and authored 8 books. He regularly teaches workshops and gives presentations at library conferences on a wide range of topics. So I have, before leaving the floor to Marshall, I have a couple of housekeeping rules as well. The event, we're recording the event and it will be made available from Suna Kıraç Library's YouTube channel. So please be aware that the event is recorded. So we will have first his presentation and then we will have enough time for question and answers. So please take your notes for your questions, and at the end we will have enough time to get your questions and get them answered. And while you ask your questions, of course, this will be heard on the recording. So this is why I'm stressing out the KVKK issues here, GDPR issues here. So I leave the floor now to Marshall. Again, thank you very much for being with us today.
Well, so I am delighted to be here. My first visit to Turkey. I've been, fortunate to visit many other parts of the world and many other countries, but this is the first time that I've had a chance to come visit Turkey, and the first day or so in Istanbul has been amazing to see. Exhausting. We traveled by walking 22,000 steps yesterday, so it's been fun. It's been interesting. So I want to take some time and kind of talk about some of these trends that I follow and call this talk "The Future of Library Automation," and I focus on kind of resource management systems and discovery systems, among others. But those are the main kind of systems that I follow, that I try to understand. And understand means understanding in context. That every part of the world, every region, every country brings its own context to libraries. The way that libraries work, how what kind of materials they collect, the kinds of financial resources available, certainly varies tremendously from library to library. So, anytime that I talk about trends, I can speak kind of broadly, but, what are the trends in your library? You know that better than I do. So, we can have more of a conversation about, well, how do the trends that I observe happening in the broader world have to do with here, libraries in Turkey, libraries in Istanbul. So I hope that we can kind of talk more about that in the question and answer session. So since the mid 1990s, maybe early 1990s, I've been maintaining this website called Library Technology Guides. It is kind of a very long project that I've had to be able to collect information about, trends in the libraries, what it has different components. I'll show you in a minute. That it first started off kind of with libraries in the U.S., Europe, and try to make it as broad as I can. Again, it's interesting to know what's happening in the U.S. and Europe, but it's really more interesting to understand kind of the libraries that are in different parts of the world and how those trends are different. So this is just a capture of the front page of it, just to kind of get us started. But there are different components of it. One is the directory of libraries. That is a directory that I've been working on since about 1993, I think. Trying to, from whatever source, be able to account for as many libraries in the world as I can. I think IFLA once, or maybe it was OCLC, estimated there are 1.2 million libraries in the world. My database has about 200,000. So, recognizing that it's not completely comprehensive, and the coverage is uneven, what can we understand about the world of libraries? Well, there's a library directory, there's kind of news and events section, any company or organization that makes an announcement related to the types of technologies that I track, and then a lot of other kind of guides and other resources to help put some of that information together. So here is a slide that I generated. I think this is not libraries in Turkey, but this is Washington, D.C. But, I do try to track libraries everywhere. So let's see what I have about Turkey, if I can get to the others here. Yes, oops. If I get to the other page that I launched, I thought I would be able to get to it by this one. This one. Do I need to add slideshow here? Let me show that. Okay, I'll get back. Okay, so here is, we're looking at my website, and that internet and everything is working well. I could say, okay, show us all of the academic libraries and Turkey. And we can see that I have 145, and we know there's 200 and something academic libraries, so that we know that I have at least a lot of them, if not most of them. And so for any of the libraries, I collect different kinds of information. So let's look at the first thing that we notice is that a lot of the libraries are using this automation system. It seems to be the main one used outside of Sierra. Okay, just making. So this one doesn't have a lot of information about it, but at least I know that it exists and that there's an entry for it. I want to get back to Crook. Did I miss it? That was
Boğaziçi Üniversitesi.
The fourth one from the top.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, so here, we have a little bit more information. At least we have the geographic coordinates, so that makes it show up on different map reports that I do. And we know that using Sierra since 2015, Millennium 97, before that, there was a local system that was used. I don't know what that is. And then you're using Primo now, I guess, with the hexagram. So anyway, it's just an example to show the different kinds of automation systems that are there. And then once I have that, I think that I can go to just reorganize this differently. So let's see. And then choose Turkey. The list, oh, but I don't have it on the control list here. But anyway, you would be able to see the proportions of systems. So the idea meaning that, I do try to study what systems are used in what parts of the world. And the other thing that we'll notice if we look at libraries and public libraries in Turkey, we'll see that I do have a lot of information about the public libraries in Turkey. And that I have almost 1,000 public libraries in Turkey in the database. And the reason they are in, one of the reasons is that I was tracking the implementation of this co-automation system, which is up practically nationwide in public libraries. And that's a very interesting project for me. Interested in learning more about that for those of you that might have more information about it. So the important thing, though, is that this is a growing database. Every time I go to a new part of the world and have a meeting with libraries, I always encourage them to kind of make sure that my information about your library is up to date. So let's get back to the presentation, more or less where I was. Okay, so with that little divergence, let's talk more about some of the trends that we see in the world. I've been doing this library systems report since about 2002, so more than 20 years. It's been interesting to do kind of this same snapshot of what's happening in library automation year after year. So to be able to kind of track the different systems that have come and gone over a couple of decades. It focuses a little bit more on the US, but there's always an international section in the report where I try to highlight some of the important things that are happening outside of the US. So here I've been doing it for American Libraries, Library Journal before that. And so the last version, I guess I didn't have a lot of details I want to share on that. But this other report that I do every year is called the Library Perceptions Report. The Library Systems Report is based mostly on information that I get from the different vendors and suppliers, in addition to other information that I collect. The Perceptions Report is a survey that I send to libraries where, because it's in my database, I know what library system you're using. Tell me what you think about it. Is it meeting your expectations? Does it have the capabilities that you want? Do you like the service that you're getting from the vendor? How well does it do for managing print resources, electronic resources, and so forth? So I've been doing that survey since 2007. And it's incredibly interesting to kind of see how the different products have been evaluated by the libraries that use them over time. I'm currently collecting data for the 2023 version of that survey. So I certainly invite you to go to my website and click through the links that let you respond to that survey. If you go to librarytechnology.org, which is the top page of my website, you'll see the main entry is talking about the survey. So please come and visit the website and respond to the survey. It's one thing to know what systems are used in different libraries in different parts of the world, public, academic, school. It's another thing to get more information on how well they're working. And whether a library is thinking of changing or not. So this is really an important project for me year by year, the results of this survey that give me insight into kind of what's happening next in the world of library systems. Particular system that may say that, well, 25% of the libraries using it are considering changing. So that's an important piece of information. Or that this system works really well for managing electronic resources, but not print, or the other way around. A system that does print, but as academic libraries use more and more electronic resources, how well does the system help them in doing that? So, this adds a lot more information to kind of the perspective and insight that I have about the different systems that are out there. Okay, so what are some of the trends? The important thing, again, to consider is that the trends vary by type of library. That especially when you look at public and academic libraries, the kinds of systems they use, what their libraries do, what kind of materials they collect, what services they offer are increasingly different. There's one point of view that libraries are kind of diverge into a single kind of organization, but my observation is that they're diverging more. That academic libraries are ever more different than public and school and corporate libraries than before. And we'll talk about some of the reasons behind that. Okay, so there are a lot of global trends that are happening related to technology. We certainly are aware that cloud-based services are increasingly the way that businesses and users and libraries consume technology. It's less and less the case that we're taking software, installing it on a local computer in order to run a system of different kinds. Almost everything that we use these days, you have a web address and URL, you sign into it, and then you're using that application. It's certainly that true in business and social media, and increasingly in libraries as well. So expect more of that transition to cloud computing in the systems that we use. And even if it's web-based, what is the kind of internal architecture? There's a lot of kind of important technical issues that kind of make one of these web-based systems kind of truly modern and interoperable or not. So this is the way of general technology trends, but then like when I travel in India and other places where they may not have electricity 24 hours a day, they certainly don't have the type of internet connectivity that means that their libraries can operate on a truly web-based system, especially if it's not, in the local area in India. And that's true in Latin America and other parts of the world. So, there's a lot of kind of economic and other concerns that have a lot to do with the types of technology that are going to work for any given library. So, of course, libraries themselves and within, collectively or individually have to kind of think carefully about what their technology strategies are going to be. Are there things that they will build themselves to use? That's becoming less common in the library systems realm. Mostly we acquire or license software for the big systems that we use, and then make sure that the features and the functionality, the shape of the system matches what your library does. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And then there's this interesting comparison between open source systems and proprietary systems in almost all kinds of libraries. So open source is becoming a larger trend in both public and academic libraries, but it's not a universal trend. In some parts of the world, open source systems are not as well accepted, but I think that's changing. And I think that the way that it's offered, whether it's open source or proprietary, is really a secondary issue compared to, is this software, does it meet your needs? Is it sophisticated enough? Does it manage the type of materials that you want? You got to answer those questions first before you say, yeah, I want an open source system or a proprietary system. So the license models are a consideration, but often not the top consideration. I often get asked, what's the most innovative library system out there? And then, my answer is usually like none of them. One, because, library systems tend to be a bit further behind than other sectors when it comes to technology. And the other part of the answer, the important part of the answer is, these systems are about efficiency and operational concerns. Innovation lives elsewhere. That innovation, doesn't have to do with, how your system does circulation or acquisitions or cataloging. It has to do, well, is it doing those things efficiently enough that your staff and your technologists have the capacity to do kind of the other things that matter to your library users? That is where, you can use your talent to create innovation. So, that's my answer when I'm so often asked, I want the most innovative system out there, other than the company that it comes from. I know a lot of you use Sierra and the company is innovative, but I don't mean it in that sense. And the idea that which technology is the most flexible. Once again, stressing that academic and research libraries and public libraries are going mostly different directions these days. In academic libraries, most of the work that the library does these days relates to electronic resources, subscribing to scholarly journals, providing access to articles, book chapters, research reports, which are mostly issued electronically. And even monographs, it's just as likely to be ebooks as it is printed books. I know that, and this is another area where it varies by part of the world. When I speak in India and Latin America, they're doing more and more electronic resources, but they're still heavily invested in print. And so it'll be interesting to learn over the next few days, how that plays out here in Turkey. So in both parts of the world now, they're having to make transitions to systems that manage electronic resources in best possible ways, and find systems that help users find information at the article level. Because if you're presenting a search box and a user types in the name of a research article or an author of a research article, and they don't get that because you're only indexing books and journal titles, then that's not really doing what you need to do. So index-based discovery and electronic resource management are some of the must-have capabilities of the technology systems that academic libraries use. How can you take the materials that you license in the library and make sure that they're easily and legally used in course readings? So more and more functionality is related to that. Public libraries are still mostly involved in circulating print materials. And I see that all around the world. It's not that they don't also have ebooks, but even the New York Public Library and some of the other large famous public libraries, the vast amount of their collections go to print resources and to lending those resources. More and more ebooks too, but those fundamental differences mean the type of technology machinery that the library needs to operate are going to be different. But it's also kind of beyond the collections. Sure, if you have mostly electronic resources, you need to manage those in the best way that you can, but more and more libraries are wanting to do other things. This is again kind of where innovation resides. most academic libraries are, since they have less use of print collections, especially, back files to journals and so forth, they're repurposing space. How do you provide less space, dedicate less space for storing materials that are not used very much to providing end user spaces that can help them kind of learn collaboratively, do projects, use technology, and so forth. So, I think that is an important movement that we're seeing in academic and research libraries, is kind of a more user-focused use when it comes to the physical spaces as well. See, I've done lots of projects and observed this happening where large libraries that have had very large print collections are moving those to offsite or other kinds of arrangements where you can still ask for the materials and have them the same day or the next day, but you're not dedicating most of the space of your library to housing those materials. You're making it available easily, quickly enough, but you're using library spaces in kind of ways that users appreciate more. Learning management systems, I touched on that. Again, meet the users where they are. If a student, for example, every day has to use their course management system to get their assignments, to get their grades. Here's the list of materials that they need to read for, the course this week, this day, and it's linking them to the materials that the library has licensed for them. So I think that's another point that we're seeing. And then for research libraries, how can the library be more actively and proactively involved in the research process? How can the library help researchers be more successful in getting grants from governments and private foundations? How can they help with the data management part of grants, which is increasingly a requirement? If you're going to do publicly funded research, how are we going to make that data available to other scientists so that those results can be replicated? So there's a role for libraries in that. Big data is a big topic. That data sets are of very large scale these days. Do libraries have the tools and the technologies to get the meaning out of data and to do statistics and analytics and so forth with these very large data sets? So that has to do both with supportive research and then also support of how the library itself is assessing its own work and its collections and so forth. How your public library are using big data to make sure that you're meeting the needs of the residents of your service area, by neighborhood and so forth, knowing who is served and who's underserved. So there's a lot of role for big data in helping libraries understand those kinds of problems. Again, it helps them configure their facilities, where to put branches and so forth, and then how to make it personal. And of course, most people use the library resources on their smartphones and not their computers. So make sure that everything that you do is very well, pretty easily used through mobile devices. Most libraries are seeing probably at least half of their use coming from mobile devices. So if it doesn't work well, then you're really losing a lot of opportunity. So this has to do with both the public and academic libraries, but we've understood kind of what a library management system does. It catalogs books, provides circulation, you have a catalog for them. It sends notices to users when something's available, when something's overdue, and that's really a very impersonal approach to dealing with library patrons. What I'm seeing more and more has to do with technologies, have to do with patron engagement. How can libraries work more, like marketing is not really the word that I like the best, but how can we market and provide services in ways that are more interesting and appreciated by users, not by getting some little, text-oriented message saying that your books are due, but we understand that you're interested in this area of research. We've got a new collection in this area. We're offering a program from an author or researcher. We want to let you know about that. And that's not something you blast out to every one of your users. You use kind of the analytics and segmentation software to understand what users have, what interests, in ways that also protects kind of privacy. GDPR, as we had the conversation to know whether or not this could be recorded, that you're aware it's being recorded. The same kinds of issues naturally apply when you're doing personalized services for patrons. So can you do that according to categories and groups without kind of violating some of the issues of privacy of that user? Can they opt out of it? Are you using personally identifiable information? Are you using aggregate information that's been fully normalized that still helps you deliver personalized services, but in private kinds of ways? And then you can use messaging engines to be able to not just insert notices that say your book is due, but be able to kind of say, here's a newsletter for researchers in physics. This is what we have. This is new stuff that we have. And then you join the library. We see that you're a first-year student. Here's information that you need to know as you begin to use the library as part of your university career. So I think this is a set of technologies that I think will be kind of more and more important looking forward. The systems that do this are still fairly unsophisticated, I think, but I think we'll be seeing more of that. So turning next to kind of library management systems. What are the systems that libraries are using, will be using to manage their day-to-day work, to manage their collections, the way that they describe things and provide their services? So Library Services Platform is this kind of new category of software. It's not that new. It's been more or less being implemented by academic libraries since 2012. So it's a decade into the life cycle of this kind of software. But it's library specific, technically it's oriented to services, and it's using these web-based technologies. The thing that is important about it is that academic libraries have to manage complex multi-format collections. You have print materials, electronic materials, digital materials, and even within electronic resources, you have open access content that is available to anyone. You may have article processing fees that have to be paid by researchers when they publish. How does the library help track that? So managing electronic resources is complex. The metadata formats involved are complex, whether it's MARC, Dublin Core, Onyx, or all the different forms of metadata that come in that describe each kind of material that the library has. So how you acquire things is got to be flexible, got to be able to analyze things, to make decisions about what to collect and not collect. And then the heart of it are these knowledge bases that have kind of pre-populated databases of the content that's available to the library globally. That, we know that, this particular package that's sold by Elsevier has these journal titles in it, and for each title it has a certain amount of coverage and so forth. So libraries shouldn't never have to track that individually. They should just be able to click on a box and say, yes, I subscribe to this package, and then the system knows about all of those, the complete coverage of it by virtue of that. So get from individual resource management to portfolio-based resource management, because that's what academic and research libraries need to do to manage resources at the scale that they do. One by one isn't so great. And they come on certain kinds of technology platforms. I won't dwell on that, but they're built the way that other businesses would build their applications. So modern web-based technology. And then that's not the be all and end all of that. These products will continue to evolve and expand in scope and so forth. So again, when we go from the integrated library system, we realize that kind of hit a few dead ends. We don't want this next generation of software likewise to hit dead ends. And so I kind of categorize them into, what's an integrated library system? So Sierra would fit there, clearly. And then some that are in between, and then others that are this new style of automation system. And then there are open source and proprietary versions of those. Open source, it is a business model that has to do with how software is built and released. So it's a license model. It means that, okay, we're going to build software, and because of the license model, anybody else can get access to the source code that is behind this application. Different business competitors, users, and so forth. So it's a pretty different style of doing software compared to proprietary software, where the code is fully owned by an individual organization, usually. And there's also for-profit and non-profit that have, the different kinds of software. Okay. Again, I don't want to talk about this particular point too much, just to let you know that there are these differences out there. And so within Turkey, we talked about KOA being used by the public libraries. That's an open source system that nobody owns that software. And then Sierra is a proprietary system that's owned by Innovati, which is owned by ProQuest, which is owned by Clarivate. So again, it's in the kind of fully licensed and owned arena. And then open source emphasizes kind of collaboration and community in the way that the software is built and supported. But I also say this applies to proprietary software as well. When you look at the users groups for Ex Libris and so forth, they fully embrace collaboration and community in the way that software is supported not only by the company, but by the users that have implemented it. Okay. Open source doesn't mean kind of volunteer work to implement the system. There's almost always a business component where you're paying an organization to host and support that software. That happens mostly in Europe and the US and so forth. In Latin America and India, it's more libraries to it on their own. So again, that varies. Okay. And so what are some of the differences? Some of the products out there, the open source systems would include KOA, Folio. I'm sure that EBSCO has been talking to you a lot about Folio. That's their main platform that they're strategically kind of positioning to the academic library community globally. And it's a very interesting system and product. So I've been following that pretty carefully. And then there are discovery environments and ebook environments and so forth that are open source. For every kind of type of software that a library is interested in using, you're likely to find both open source and proprietary versions of that. So again, my view is that first find the software that meets your needs. And then if you prefer open source and you have one that meets your needs, then that might help you decide. But if you don't find an open source software, there will be proprietary products and services as well. So again, don't make the business model of the software be the deciding factor. Make sure it's serving as the software that can best serve your needs. Open source software has been growing in the US for quite a while. It's been available since about 2005. That's when COA started being implemented. And you can see after all that time, the majority of software used by academic libraries and public libraries in the US is proprietary. That public libraries, they have COA and Evergreen, adding up to be maybe 15%. And then academic libraries, these numbers are changing. There'll be more over time, but really only 7%, almost 8% of academic libraries in the US are using open source software for their main system. Okay. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about that, I hope. Questions? But discovery, is the other side of it. The integrated library system, the library services platform are mostly used by the staff members of the library. There are the other side of that are the discovery systems. Sometimes the discovery system is bundled, if not built in to the automation system, but it's important to look at them for their capabilities and understand that they're kind of a different category of product as well. Again, that goes back to the thing that I mentioned early on. You want to make sure that when you offer a search box to your users, it's giving them access to everything that you consider part of your collection. That means, the books and ebooks that you have, every article that you license, digital objects that you either license or digitize and describe. If users expect that to be a comprehensive search box, of course, they're used to Google, knowing that if they type a word in Google, they're essentially getting information from all available sources. The library kind of needs to emulate that. They're having said, look for journal articles here, look for books here. That doesn't necessarily resonate real well with users. So there's this category of index-based discovery services that have a central index of all of the materials that are available in what I call the scholarly communications arena, all of the kind of scholarly publishers, business publishers, information that libraries would consider vetted and reliable information. So creating that index is quite an interesting challenge. I think that, they don't all mention numbers, but I've heard both Ex Libris and EBSCO describe their index as being about 4 billion items. And that seems like a pretty reasonable number to say that, if you were to index all of the scholarly articles in the world, it would be about that, I think. OCLC doesn't mention that. Again, public libraries are different. They focus more on the books. They don't need these massive and expensive index-based discovery services. Okay, don't really want to, so main to put this slide in, but there are different styles of software development that go behind these systems. I'm going to skip a bit of that. This is what I meant to go to. So between academic libraries and public libraries, the idea of a catalog is still more meaningful to them. Discovery services is more meaningful to academic libraries at this point. Next couple of slides kind of help visualize that a little bit. So if you take all of the different types of content that an academic or research library cares about and is invested in, as either licensed or produced, they need to go into this one consolidated index that then shows up through relevancy and other types of search mechanisms that users are going to use. They might also kind of create their own interface, but still relying on that centralized consolidated index. This is what it takes if you want to have a comprehensive search box. This goes back to the question of, is this part of the system that you implement for your staff, or is it separate? Technically, it's mostly separate, but pragmatically, they're always bundled together. If you get ex libris alma, you're probably going to use premium, maybe some. If you get folio, you're probably going to use EBSCO Discovery Service. If you use OCLC's World Share Management Services, you're definitely going to be using WorldCat Discovery Services. So anyway, so, how do you get, from discovery to content management and so forth? Yes. We talked about the scope of search. This is probably unsuccessful for most academic libraries. That if you're only searching books at the journal and journals at the title level, it's not going to work. So how do you go from catalog to discovery service? And this is another way of looking at the same thing. The vendors are putting together indexes based on this kind of wide variety of content from commercial publishers, blending it with local data to have an advanced search engine that can respond to users. The other side of that is discoverability. The reality is that as much as we put a library catalog or discovery service on our websites, users don't use them. We're kidding ourselves if we think that that's the way that our users are getting to the resources that we're investing in. I don't know if I have it in this deck, but JSTOR has given me a slide a few years over time. The latest version of that shows that from their perspective, only 8%, if I remember the number correctly, of people who access journals on JSTOR are coming from a library-provided discovery tool or a linked solver. Most, by far, are coming through Google Scholar, going through directly, using bookmarks. So even though it's important to have a discovery service, it's also important to ensure that the materials that you license and the materials that you have locally in your catalog are discoverable in the broader web. So is your catalog well integrated, with the Google infrastructure so that when you search on Google or Google Scholar, the materials in your library show up and then have ways to link from that to the version that you have? And is it available on your shelf? Is it available to your users as part of your license agreements? So discoverability, in a way, is more important than these discovery tools that we plant on our websites. So the future resource discovery is kind of going that way, that increasingly, these indexes have to be comprehensive. We need all the publishers to provide their content in them and they be up to date, and that there be mechanisms that connect these resources to the broader internet. And then you link data and AI technologies help in that cause. I don't want to talk more about that. Distributed discovery is more, no matter where the user is, are they going to find the material from your library and be able to use it and know that it was you that provided it? You hear these stories, right? That the student says, well, I never go to the library. I don't need the library. Yet all of their work is based on articles that the library subscribes to, but they wouldn't have access if the library didn't subscribe to them. So how do you help your users know that you help them, even when they don't go to the library website? So it's got to go through all of these different kinds of layers. I want to make sure I get to the next couple of slides. Yeah, so you have to have, a lot of different tools and technologies that can help in that way. This is a top one. Are you or your vendors doing the right things to ensure that when a student or a researcher begins on Google Scholar, that they will be able to have the right linking to get to the version that you license and not get this paywall that says, yeah, you can read this article if you pay your, $35 or whatever. So, how do you kind of make sure that your resources are well used by the individuals that don't go to your website? Yeah. So linked data has been a big topic for a decade or so. In the cataloging realm, we're talking about the transition from MARC to BibFrame to using more wiki data and things like that in order to bring library technologies into the semantic web. That's been going on for a long time. I would say it's borne very little fruit so far. That, the transition from MARC to BibFrame is barely underway, and that linked data technologies really have not transformed the realm of discovery in the way that we thought that they might a decade or two ago. Will there be kind of open access versions of these discovery indexes? I'm not very optimistic about that. They're kind of open source interfaces. But kind of more what I'm thinking is that, these vendor-based indexes will continue to exist into the long future, but they're still not enough. I don't know if I included this slide, I think that I did, where AI technologies rather than linked data, I think will play a bigger and bigger part of how libraries are able to kind of help users find resources. Okay, so open scholarship, the transition from licensed articles to open access articles is a very big deal for libraries. That if you're a researcher, it's more likely or not that your new publications may be through some type of open access agreement. Whether you pay an article processing charge or whether you're covered by a transformative agreement, I would say, I think by latest estimates, more than half of the recent articles published are open access. Things like anybody can use them without a library having to subscribe for them. That makes the library's work in managing electronic resources more complicated, not less complicated. Because it's easy enough to provide access to all the open access content, but then how do you continue to make sure that they get the relevant subscribed content that isn't available that way? Because you can't do basic research, life and death kind of research, if you're only looking at open access articles when there might be proprietary articles on the same topic that have newer or different information. So it's really important that even as open scholarship happens more, that libraries are able to provide access to resources regardless of the business model that the articles were published in. So again, I think that makes things complicated. In some parts of the world, the cost of subscribing to electronic resources is practically prohibitive. So in one way, they embrace open access because their users get to get more and more articles without having to pay. The flip side of it is that they're even more disturbed about the kind of open access publishing models that require researchers to pay to be published. Because most of those article processing fees are extraordinarily expensive to researchers in Latin America and India and other countries that have less rich economies. So, both of them have kind of intrinsic problems that I hope that libraries and publishers find ways to resolve better. Okay. So I don't want to say more about this. What I do want to move on to is this, that one of the major trends I see in the way that libraries automate is through partnerships and cooperation and consolidation of libraries into larger scale systems. Of course, we know the vendors are consolidating and there are fewer systems, but on the other side, that libraries need to have the most efficient and the most impactful ways of managing their organizations and providing access to their resources. we're used to the idea of an integrated library system handling multiple divisions or branches. For a large university, you have one instance of Sierra, for example, and all of the different libraries within the university use that system. There are consortial resource sharing environments where each integrated library system of different organizations can be connected through some type of middleware that allows users from one library to borrow materials from another. That's a common arrangement for a consortium of university libraries to provide resources among themselves. The other approach is where, rather than having different organizations and different universities each have their own separate ILSs, why can't we think of having shared systems that span multiple institutions? That is probably one of the biggest trends that I see in academic library resource management are these very large-scale implementations of systems where you take very large consortia. One example would be all of the academic libraries in a state. All saying, instead of each of us having our separate system, we're going to all chip in and get a single system that we all participate in, where our users easily know what's available throughout the organization and can acquire those, more or less using the circulation part of the system instead of interlibrary loan. And these systems can be very large scale. Can serve hundreds of universities, and they don't all have to be the same. They can be big, they can be little, they can be public, they can be private. They just have to have agreements about how they're going to share the system, and all of these kind of political issues that are involved in sharing a system. And it's those political issues, of course, that are more difficult than the technical issues, because these modern systems scale very large, but they also help, collaborative collection development and so forth. What I see in a lot of parts of the world is the decline of standalone systems. I'm going to implement an automation system for my library, and that's kind of it. More and more, I think that libraries are looking to partners to be able to kind of share the cost of automation, increase the impact of their collections, and to better serve their users. One of the huge trends in academic libraries is a decreasing investment in print resources. Most of the libraries that I looked at, if you look at the circulation figures of 2000 to 2000 compared to 2020, they're about a 10. So, the use of print resources is dropping dramatically. So for what you do have, how do you share it, most effectively? As you're acquiring fewer new resources, how do you provide access for your users to more resources? And it's these consortial and resource sharing systems that I think are part of that. You can rely on your colleagues and other universities to each have areas of strength and different subject areas, so that collectively you still have a very large collection to offer to your users. And then the same thing stands for the print resource, for the electronic resources, where there's probably more overlap. So this collaborative infrastructure, I think, is something that should be considered. One of the odd things that I notice is that libraries in US and Europe and Australia are probably the ones that are going more toward this collaborative shared infrastructure. So they're getting a lot of efficiency, economies of scale and all of that. And then in the countries that have less money are still doing individual systems that are by far the most expensive way to automate. So I've never really been able to come up with a way to kind of solve that issue. How can, say, India, just to pick on them because they're the classic example, how do they come up with the initial investment to install a shared system that will benefit all of the libraries? compared to each of them spending more money altogether for their individual systems. And the other thing that I notice is that in Latin America and India, even within a large university, every library has their own separate automation system. They don't even have a central automation system for the university. So how do you get from, separate systems, separate silos to collaborative infrastructure that I think will, in the end, benefit each individual institution, the library community, and certainly the community of library users. So, that I think is kind of an important way that I think libraries can benefit.
Can I ask a question? Because this is, I think, the right spot. I agree, the shared infrastructure, this is wonderful. Do you know, do you have any data, how much saving happens when institutions come together? Of course, it depends on the number of institutions and many other factors, but in average, how much or what kind of financial benefits we should consider?
So that's a good question that's hard to answer. So when I look at the University of California system as an example, where there's 100 separate universities, 100 individual libraries within the 35 separate universities, they're doing shared infrastructure on a very large scale. The thing about cost is that it's always non-public. So I don't have ways to know, well, how much were they spending individually on their separate systems, and now what are they spending on their collective systems? It's also on their collective system. It's also hard because the previous system was just an integrated library system. The next system was Alma Library Services platform that does more. So it not only manages print, it managed electronic resources, and it came with Primo, which is the index-based discovery system. So if you look at their new system-wide Alma Primo installation, it would come with a certain price tag that would be hard to compare with all the separate, they're all different kinds of ILSs it replaced, but all of those added together, would still be less than the Primo system, but the Primo system is doing more for them. So I think that, you would have, one would be able to answer that question with enough data. But I think that there's substantial savings. And it's not just the financial savings, but it's the increased impact to your users. How do you make that quantity of material available to users beyond what you're spending in your own collection budget? So it has to do with collections, it has to do with systems. It's a great question. So I think resource sharing is kind of built into libraries. We love to do interlibrary loan. Most of the interlibrary loan arrangements are relatively slow and expensive. So how do you make that part of the core infrastructure instead of something that you do through separate systems? Okay, so I'm kind of ending on this shared infrastructure topic, and these are just, a few topics that I selected out of the ones I'll be talking about next week. But I think we have plenty of time left still for further conversations. But, so here's some, here just some ideas that, one, academic libraries are involved more in articles and print. There are moving from integrated library systems to library services platforms in order to be able to manage electronic resources. And the next step is, how do you go beyond that to be able to share among institutions and think beyond each individual library and its university? How do we work for kind of the common good of researchers and students throughout Turkey, for example? Okay. So I think that's the end of my slide, so I hope that we have time for further conversation.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to open the floor for questions. this has been like a crash course, Library Automation 101. Thank you so much because you cover so much areas falling under Library Automation, please. As I'm the moderator for today, I will use my advantage and ask the first question, if you don't mind, and then I will open the floor really for your questions. So I heard myself a success story here because since 2007 you've been surveying libraries, not only in the US but libraries from all around the world. And these reports contribute to decisions making. And how did you decide, first of all, to start a survey like this one? And how did you reach to such a big number? Because you said 200,000, if I'm not mistaken. How did you reach this number, which is huge? And what is the story behind this success?
So,
May I add one question?
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
When did you start to publish your own report or articles, or is it published in library journal in the past?
Yeah, okay, so let's think about the separate things that we're talking about. One is that the library systems report is an article that was originally published by Library Journal, and it has been around a long time. Other authors did it before 2002, and then beginning 2002, they asked me to take it on. And when I took it on, I had a certain structure that I wanted to do it in that had, a certain set of forms that I would ask vendors to respond to. What systems do you support? How many instances of that are there globally? How many new sales did you make this year? And questions like that. So I've used that same form since 2002. And so all of the vendors that are within my scope are used to responding to that. So therefore I have 20 years of data from that set of vendors that I think shows interesting trends. So there's that. So that's a vendor-based survey that has layers of kind of what I add to it from additional information. But I don't want it to be just vendor data. I want it to be vendor data with kind of critique and perspective, because you never want to take the vendor's word for it all by itself. For example, I take sales installation figures and compare that to my database. Does it ring true? Might be off a little bit, or is it way out of line? And then I can follow up and find ways to do that.
This is why we would like to thank you, and a big thank you, because for a long time we have been following you. In the past, in my lifetime, I did not make 4 or times make a decision accusing of the Intake ILS, Intake Library System. So you make a great contribution to my decision process as a decision maker. Also, make the other person, Ertuğrul Bey or Sami Bey, really do follow up your reports and then compare the market share and a kind of the comparative study. Also, new one is coming, each company with what product. So it's a great contribution you make. So this is why the big thanks from Turkey.
And you're very welcome. And I'm so glad. It's great when I go to all these different parts of the world and folks already know about, some of the reports and resources that I provide. So it's very fulfilling. So thanks for those comments. Okay, so the other thing is the library database. So what's the beginning of that? So in 1994, right shortly in the early days of the web, I had a publisher approach me and say, what we want you to do is do, what yellow pages are. Those who are younger don't understand this concept, but the yellow pages is a business directory in paper that you would do. I need to buy a hammer, so hardware stores are near me, and they're yellow and they're thick. And so they said, we want you to make a yellow pages of the World Wide Web. And I told the publisher, this is a ridiculous idea. That this will be out of date before you even start to print it. And they said, we know. Do it anyway. So we did that, and it had different sections, and I got different folks involved to do, different parts of it. I did the library part of it, so in addition to editing it and organizing it, I actually kind of did the library section of this World Wide Web directory. So that was the beginning of this project, is that I built a database of the libraries that were on the web at the time, and there were many hundreds of them. But then once that project was out the door and, I still had the data, I continued to build that database. So I've been building this database of libraries beyond the few hundred that were in that directory to the numbers that are there now. Again, realizing that it's still far from being comprehensive, but its coverage is uneven, but it really covers the main parts of the world that buy these kinds of systems. That's kind of what drives where I focus my energy. So, through public data sets, through just individual work, doing a little bit every day. Every time I hear that a library has purchased a new system, that goes into my database. So it's been a cumulative effort of, since 1995 to build this directory. And when vendors tell me on the vendor survey, these are the libraries that we sold to, then those get in my database. So it all kind of gets lined up better and better all the time. And then the perception survey is based on the library database, where I say, I want you to respond to this survey, and it's linked to that library's entry in the library database. So then when they respond, say that, yeah, I like Sierra, but I'm thinking of changing to something, or I like Sierra, I'm not ever going to change, and I like the way it manages print. All of that is kind of linked to the library record that allows me to say, well, for all the libraries using Sierra that are academic libraries that have large collections, what are the trends there? So it's the library database that also extends to the perceptions database to be able to further identify trends. So that they all those three projects all kind of converge on my website.
There's one question. Can you please also state your name before the thing? So because of the recording.
Ergin Çetin, Fenerbahçe University Library Director. And I noticed I couldn't see our university's webpage. Probably I'll let you know soon. I know Marshall ages ago in Tilburg University. It was a fantastic library workshop up there. And you had a nice lady, your wife, possibly. You were with her. And it was...
She's here in Istanbul.
Oh, really good. And I just wonder, I would like to ask, what do you think about Koha automation system in academic library, usage of Koha system in academic libraries? Okay.
Interesting question. So Koha is a traditional integrated library system. It came out of New Zealand in 1999. Chris Cormack, who I know well, and his colleagues at a consulting firm were asked to build a new ILS for a group of 3 libraries in New Zealand that had a system that wouldn't pass the year 2000. How many of you remember the Y2K issue? We thought the world was going to collapse when the clock turned at midnight. It didn't. But so Koha was a system built for one library that has expanded, in functionality since. There is a very large international community of developers that continue to build Koha so that it is getting more and more features, more sophisticated, and the gap between Koha and systems like Sierra and Symphony and others is smaller. It's a very robust integrated library system. But that's what it is. It's an integrated library system that is great for managing print. They're beginning to add some electronic resource management tools to it, but it's still, not a library services platform. It doesn't have a knowledge base. It's not scalable with to what we're talking about. Would 100 university libraries be able to use a single instance of COA? No, they could each implement separate instances of COA. But so it's good for what it is. But what it is not an up and coming system for academic libraries. If you want an open source system for academic libraries, the focus now is on Folio. It is a library services platform that's gone under a lot of development since about 2016, I think is when the project started. So it's kind of the alternative to Alma and WorldShare now. So it's an open source system, but I wouldn't say that, if I'm a large academic library looking to change the new automation system, I would kind of nudge more toward Folio and COA if what you care about is it being open source. But again, you should care more about what it is before you care about whether it's open source or not. Does that help? COA is the most implemented integrated library system globally. Because it's the default system in Latin America and India, and that's tens of thousands of libraries right there.
Okay, thank you very much for the correct presentation. My name is Sam Çuadar. I'm the director of İstanbul'da University Libraries. Actually, my question is related to COA. I was going to ask you, when you look at the market, which IDEs do you see in rise? And then secondly, we read that Stanford University Libraries got the Folio. So how do you interpret these recent developments? I mean, COA or Folio, and which is rising? And could you please give more information about these issues? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so COA and Folio are in different sectors, right? COA is really more involved in individual libraries with mostly print collections. Folio is more the competitor to Alma that manages print and electronic resources together and meets the more complex functionality needs of, mid to large academic libraries. So I certainly see the use of COA increasing more and more over time as more libraries in the developing world become automated. Chances are they're going to use COA. In the US, public libraries through commercial support are moving toward COA, gradually. As I said, it's still only 13% of public libraries overall, but Bywater Solutions is the company in the US that is marketing COA to mostly public libraries and small academics in the US. So those numbers are rising. Okay, Folio is a different type of system. It's built for academic libraries, built essentially by EBSCO Information Services in partnership with some other vendors and in partnership with other large libraries. There are about 120 academic libraries, mostly academic libraries, using EBSCO Folio with the flavor of Folio provided by EBSCO now. So that compares to about 3,000, I think, using Alma. I think that Folio will continue to grow, but it will deceive when it gets as many as Alma. That's going to be, in the distant future. So it used to be, Alma from Ex Libris and WorldShare Management Services from OCLC were both launched in about 2012. And those were the main competitors for academic libraries in US, Europe, and beyond for that till about 3 years ago. Your short list of systems was either Alma or WMS. Now, if you're a large academic library, the short list is Alma or Folio. OCLC is getting new libraries adopting WMS, but for the larger libraries, Folio and Alma are usually the top choices.
What about the OCS World Share Management?
Yeah, so like I said, WMS, World Share Management Services, was Alma's main competitor between 2012 and 2020. Ex Libris Alma got 5 times the market share that OCLC did over that period. So now, it will WMS from OCLC will continue to get new libraries using it, but not in the same numbers as Folio and Alma. Alma is still getting a lot of new business and Folio is a formidable competitor. So going back to Folio, so there's EBSCO Folio where you pay EBSCO a certain amount per year. They host and support Folio, usually with EBSCO Discovery Services, in the same way that Ex Libris supports Alma. So it's a comprehensive solution that includes open source and proprietary products, all supported by EBSCO. There's also libraries that either use Folio supported by other vendors, Index Data is one of them, and others that do it completely on their own. And that's where Stanford would come in. They've actually been using Folio for a while, but they recently made an announcement that, yeah, we've fully converted to Folio, and they did it all on their own. The Library of Congress has selected EBSCO to help them implement Folio as their next automation environment, library LCAS system. So Folio has got a lot of momentum behind it now, and I think it will continue that momentum, and it will be used in more and more libraries. And EBSCO is a big deal in the library world, as you know, and so they're putting their full marketing and development and support effort behind Folio in the same way that Ex Libris does Alma. So I think that Folio will continue to be the up and coming system for large academic libraries. Small academic libraries, they feel overwhelmed by Alma, they kind of feel overwhelmed by Folio. So, I think they continue to use those systems, but more as part of a consortium than implementing it completely on their own.
I'm wrong, please correct. We found works with Koha well to search electronic resources.
With Koha, you can't type in the name of a journal author or title and you get that unless you cataloged it individually, because it doesn't come with a knowledge base that has all of that. You can use Koha in conjunction with EBSCO Discovery Service, where it's the discovery service and you're just using Koha to manage your print resources. So there are arrangements like that, but if you want comprehensive management of your print and electronic resources, then Koha's, isn't the ideal system for that. And I think I got some slides that I'll show at the conference next week where it kind of shows the model between separate electronic resource management with an ILS and how that's kind of converged into the library services platform where you manage those together.
Thank you very much. I'm Suna from MEF University. Before asking my question, I would like to say something about your great presentation. When I was following your presentation, I felt that I'm watching my professional historical documentary, because you stated that several topics related to my previous experiences, such as consortiums, resource sharing, transformative agreements, integrations, etc. Also, my question is related to the hot topic of today, is Koha. All the libraries collecting personal data, significant part of the populations. And many people believe that open softwares and open platforms are more risky than the commercial ones. How do you evaluate that problem? Is this an issue for Koha and other non-commercial products?
So
Thank you.
when it comes to security, there are open source and proprietary foundations for that. So is it a security risk that the source code to your system is generally available so that somebody might figure out how to get into it? Okay, that's the question. So when you look at the overall internet, there are, I don't forget what the portions, it used to be about equal, business information servers, web servers that were best based on Linux, which is open source, versus Windows, which is closed source. So there is no general view that Linux or Windows is more or less secure than the other. So having access to the source code can be seen as both a positive and a negative thing when it comes to security. The positive thing is that anybody can look at that source code and see that, yeah, there is a bug here that needs to be fixed because it could allow someone to break in and get access to data. And then on the proprietary side, nobody sees the source code. So if there's a lapse, if there's a gap, if there's a problem, nobody knows it until somebody finds it. So there's no universal answer to that. One's not better than the other. It really depends on the quality of the code and who's maintaining it. So, COA is very high quality code. And the folks that are involved in that are certainly aware of these security issues. And a lot of it has with implementation. Are you implementing your open source solution in a way that doesn't have leaky APIs that somebody can sign into and get personal data? So, yeah. And the same thing is true with a proprietary system. It has to do with the implementation, the security, and how much attention was paid to make sure that data doesn't leak.
Thank you.
Hi, Marshall. My name is Suna from Koç University. Actually, my question is really related to the talk actually you did right now. So, according to how can libraries address concerns regarding to the security and privacy of the user information? Because right now, as we are speaking of the open source coding, we have to hire really high tech people to just block all kind of open doors and backdoors in these open source coding.
Well, so the issue is that with open source, depending on how you are acquiring it, say if you're licensing Folio from EBSCO, or if you're licensing COA from Bywater, part of the support services includes security to ensure that there aren't backdoors and all the kinds of things that it takes to pass the kind of rigorous security requirements that government agencies especially have. So in one way, it's part of a standard deployment of open source from the main vendors. If you're implementing on your own, then you're kind of on your own likewise to make sure that you have the network and the security engineers that know the software in a way that they can keep it secure for your institution, for your instance of it. So that's kind of a fundamental question. Do you want to license software, either proprietary software from a vendor whose then responsibility is to make it a secure system? When you acquire the system, one of your requirements would be that it meets the security specifications that are probably coming from your government or university's IT system. And then you just have to verify that they in fact did that. But then if you say we're going to implement a system on our own, possibly open source, then, that's the trade-off, is that you have to either have or hire the engineers that are capable of understanding both the source code of the application, which is always very quirky, and then the security framework that your institution has specifically, in addition to GDPR and other ISO standards that need to be there if your users and your institutions are going to be confident in your use of that system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
But it's a cost either way. To think that open source is free because we're downloading and doing it ourselves and using, the computer folks that we know can work with the software, isn't really the full picture. Because as you said, you're having to hire additional, pretty expensive IT specialists to be able to do parts of it. And then the overall time that it takes from the rest of your IT department instead of something else. So that's why most open source implementations and larger libraries with budgets are done through vendors.
Thanks so much.
I have two questions based on what we heard so far from the floor. So I know there are colleagues who are considering a system change. First of all, what is the recommended cycle for system change, and what we need to observe with our current system to make such a decision? When is the right time? And the other one is, you are receiving a lot of questions from us about open source systems because of economic reasons. I mean, we all think this will be more sustainable if we go for a open source system. But we know that open access is not for free. So is it the same for open source? I mean, is it for free or not? So I have two questions: when to change the system, and if we decide to go for an open source system, is it really for free? I mean,
It's not at all for free.
yeah.
So my guess is that for large implementations, open source may be of similar cost, maybe a little less, but it's not going to be massively less costly unless you already have IT folks that aren't busy doing something else, right? But whether you hire them or give them the work of doing it, you're either directly or indirectly paying a large amount of cost and personnel to implement and support a system. And the ongoing development of it is also going to be costly. Are things that you need that aren't in the basic open source system, things that you have the software engineers to build out. So, and compare that to fully supported open source, like EBSCOfolio, for example, that will be offered at probably a similar, maybe slightly less cost than all. Because they're proprietary, you're buying EDS, you're buying the EBSCO resource, electronic resource management components and so forth. So costs are going to be similar in the long term when you consider all the different clusters of expense. When do you change? You change when you need to, right? It's not something that any library does for fun because it's no fun. It's a lot of work and it's costly, no matter what change you make. When you make the change has to do with when your current system isn't meeting your business needs anymore. If you're spending, 80% of your library budget on electronic resources and the system you're using mostly manages your print resources, then managing the other, resources by, in more manual ways is very costly to the institution. So there comes a time when business needs a direct, changing systems. The other is technology. If you feel like the system that you have is a dead end and isn't really going to grow into what you need, the vendor isn't adding new features, isn't changing it in ways that meet kind of your strategic expectations for what a system should do. So then it can be, those are things that drive change of the system. And then the other is, the model of automation, the thing that I would think about if you're thinking of your library getting a new system, and there are lots of other libraries that are at the same juncture, then is it time to have take advantage of an opportunity to do something together? either by saying, yeah, we're all going to buy the same system so that, we can support among ourselves better and kind of make the same step for all the academic libraries in Turkey. Or do we want to do a shared system? So that a user in one library has access to materials in the other. You come up with letters of understanding that say what the rules are to share a system, and all of those kind of difficult business things it takes to share a system. So technology, shape of automation, consortial, individual, and then requirements when it comes to the business needs of the institutions. And, and any change is hard, right? The migration of data and retraining of all of your staff, those make system changes extraordinarily expensive and disruptive.
Do you have a question?
Yes. Okay. There's one side of the library systems which bothers me. Actually, I was very glad to hear it from you during the presentation also. Those systems cannot keep up with the new technology and new trends with concerning the design and some technical infrastructure, maybe because they are very complex systems and not very easy to update all the time, but their web design are generally old-fashioned, their data structure is problematic. This even sometimes causes some security concerns and problems with integration with other systems too. Do you think it would be somehow possible to distribute those functions to the expert of each? For example, none of the systems does searching like Google do. I mean, leave the searching to Google or leave the user interface design to some expert systems. Would it be possible in the future, maybe?
Okay, let's think of the possibilities here. One is that the core of the system makes sense together, right? So you don't want to buy circulation separate from cataloging, separate from acquisitions. That model doesn't work. There was the idea for a while, let's get a best of breed system. We'll buy cataloging from Innovative, we'll buy circulation from Cersei and so forth. But the points of integration among those modules are very, very weak. It's better when they all reside on single databases that are shared among all of those modules than having to talk together through protocols and APIs that just don't exist. So the next layer is electronic resource management. So does it make sense to have separate electronic resource management or make it be part of the core? And I think increasingly the movement of library automation is such that that's part of the core for academic libraries. The overlap with the bibliographic side of things and, the catalog, the acquisition system, having multiple systems to manage, how library spends money on collections is just kind of untenable, I think. When it goes from resource management to discovery, which I think is the example, UK, is there's more of an opportunity for that. But also keep in mind what I said, that fewer and fewer users are using the library system for discovery. So you want to have one that works, one that you can, it would be odd for a library not to have any kind of search interface for all these resources that they invest in, but also that's not how most users get to those resources. So for a library to say, we're going to focus on, having a separate company build the index and discovery part of it is going to be expensive and challenging. What I've seen more libraries doing, again, I think is similar to what you're saying, is using more resources for the interfaces that users see. The design of the website needs to be way better than most academic libraries have been able to do. The look of the catalog, the discovery interface can be greatly improved without having to then index yourself these 4 billion items that we're talking about, because you can use the discovery index from Ex Libris, XGO, or OCLC to do that part of it. So you can just focus on the interface. Keep in mind that web interface development and design it changes quickly and is very expensive. Because you have to take into account usability, accessibility, is it able to be an interface that meets the needs of those who have different disabilities, and security, and all those kinds of things. So in the library world, you see a lot of that work that's done in-house, and it kind of looks it because libraries don't have the web and the user experience developers that a lot of businesses have to be able to improve that. So yeah, you can do some, but don't think that you can have separate systems for each of these components of functionality.
Thank you very much. And this is Kerem from Istanbul'da University as well. And my question is related to the specific question. Library automation systems or LISs, they are hard to get reports and statistics, and also it's not readable well. So is it possible to enhance the richness and ease of reporting and statistics in ILS by integrating them with visualization softwares?
Yes. A lot of libraries do that. They'll use a third-party business analytics tool to take all the data, extract it out of your Sierra or other ILS in order to be able to do more reporting. The disadvantage of that is not real time, that you're getting a snapshot that maybe you can do some more interesting things with, but it's in this category of kind of big data. How do you take data out of the ILS, data out of student management, data out of demographic data sets and all of that to be able to answer some of the questions that you might have of what the library should be doing strategically. The other thing to keep in mind is that the next generation of systems, library services platforms, have business analytics built in. Alma has Oracle Business Analytics as part of its infrastructure. So, there are two ways. One is to have more business analytics built in, and the other is to be able to take the data and put it into third-party business analytics as you need to.
Metin Eskin, İstanbul Üniversitesi Cerrahpaşa. I have a question. As all we know, artificial intelligence affecting nearly all jobs and expertising areas, as all we know. I would like to learn your opinion that artificial intelligence technologies, how will affect library automation systems related to library jobs? Could we have a job at the future as cataloging as now at the old university and public library? Which automation works will increase, which ones will decrease because of artificial intelligence?
The big question of the day, isn't it? So ChatGPT has been around less than a year, and it has really transformed the overall business and consumer arena. That generative AI is used on campuses already, more than most folks will want to admit, to not only helping in the organization of information and preparation to write papers, but in the actual generation of papers. And very difficult to detect the difference between a student paper that was written by generative AI than one that the student wrote. So it's a huge problem, and it's come onto the scene extraordinarily fast. It's changed the way that we think about search. mean, you can easily enable generative assisted search in Google so that when you type in a question or a keyword, it gives you the answers. It gives you summaries of the resources in addition to the links themselves. So it changes the relationship between websites and the search engine in very disruptive kinds of ways. So it's very disruptive technology. Lots of business reports on, what jobs are going to exist or not in the future based on artificial intelligence. The recent writers and actors strike in the US. One of the huge topics is that these companies the production companies have to promise not to use generative AI to write scripts. So sure, lots of jobs are going to change or not exist in the future or exist differently because of this rapidly advancing world of generative AI. That's the library. So one is that, and I'll talk about this in my talk next week, is that library search, I didn't put in the slide for that, but one of my slides says that the future of search is going to have a lot to do with AI. It's going to have a lot more to do with AI than it does linked data. Because linked data attempts to find relationships among works based on kind of how things link together and this kind of nexus of links, whereas generative AI understands the content of the thing. So if you put in a search in Turkish, you're going to get back English and Turkish and German results that match the ideas of your search. So that is the expectation now when it comes to searching library resources, because that's being shaped by the expectations that users have when they search everything else now. So expect more of that. And the other is that what library jobs are going to change because of AI. One is that, libraries need to be smart about this, that if you're spending an hour writing up the minutes to a meeting when ChatGPT-4 could do it for you instantly, why do that? Use the tools to help save time in your day, because you've got plenty of other more creative things to do. You mentioned the ability for generative AI to create metadata. I'm both optimistic and skeptical about that. When you look at ChatGPT 3 and 4, they're both pretty horrible at creating MARC records because it gets at the basic characteristics of the current generative AI foundation models is they like to make things up. It's called hallucinations and it has bias. So creating metadata for a work is a pretty objective kind of thing. And, when I've used it to create MARC records, it does things like make up an ISBN number, make up, symbols of other libraries that may have cataloged it, because it knows what a MARC record looks like, but it doesn't know the rules. It will get better at that. So in time, I think that generative AI will be a good tool to assist catalogers and other library workers in creating metadata, more productively. I've kind of come up with this concept, how you can, the GitHub Copilot can help programmers write code. Why can't there be a cataloging Copilot that can help a cataloger create BibFrame or MARC records faster, but give them a chance to make sure that it's good, to make sure that you have high quality metadata, yet take advantage of the efficiency and speed that an AI can do in analyzing the contents of the book. Because a cataloger can't read every book. I'm married to a cataloger, but generative AI can, and it can tell you what it's about in a ways that kind of gives you a lot of insight to creating the metadata for it. When it comes to article level metadata, it's going to be even more important. Remember these discovery indexes of 4 billion. You train a large language model on those, you're going to be able to do a lot better and sophisticated discovery than the kind of simplistic keyword engines that are in place today. So yeah, there's a lot to say.
Thank you. There are many young colleagues in the room and they have many years ahead in this profession. So what kind of, with AI, I mean, generative AI being there and the other technological advancements, what kind of sets do you recommend them to get if they can?
So the skill sets that librarians and library workers have needed to have to do their jobs well certainly changed over the course of my career. So it will change from here in the future as well. So I think, you know, the thing, what's at the heart of what librarians do is really a set of activities based around certain values and priorities that libraries exist to provide access to information, to make sure that people have choices in what they read, and that institutions like universities and the public get access to the best and kind of the most wisely selected materials that they need. So that's kind of the heart of it. The actual skills that you need to know to do that will change over time. You know, when I started, you know, you had to pass the typing test and be able to mark cards and mark records. And now metadata is a much more sophisticated endeavor. You know, it's not just about describing books, it's about describing digital materials, image, video, sound. So how do you pick, you know, which kind of content and technical skills you need in order to be able to do that job, not just now, but especially in the next decade or two that you're going to be practicing that work in the library. So, you know, you focus on things that you need immediately, but always kind of have your eye on what's changing. And, you know, like today, we know that the thing that you've got to pay attention to is AI. Do I want to focus all of my energy on something that's going to be fully automated in a few years? So it's that. And the other thing that I suggest is that, you know, if you're early in your career, this is the time to kind of figure out the niche that you want to fulfill. You know, you're really interested in audiovisual and movies or something like that. How do you develop a career where you can become kind of the expert in that area of librarianship, that you'll be able to kind of pave the way for others, be the ones that others kind of look to for that, you know, to kind of give you confidence that, you know, this will be something that I can pursue, you know, for a long period of time, knowing that how we do it will change over that period of time. So it's a pretty open question.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, for making time for this extra event, because you are actually in Turkey for Uncle's Link conference, but you made this time while you are in Istanbul. Thank you so much for your presentation, as well as answering so many questions coming from the floor. Thank you so much. Very nice to meeting you, and we hope to see you again in Istanbul or in Turkey.